One ordinary morning, I thought life was peaceful in my quiet lakeside home until a single phone call shattered everything. My son, a pilot, swore he saw my daughter-in-law boarding a plane to Rome, yet at that very moment I could hear her humming in the shower upstairs. What followed was a terrifying journey into secrets, lies, and the discovery of two identical women whose lives were bound by betrayal and blood. I uncovered a hidden twin, a secret lover, and a web of deception that nearly tore my family apart. But from the ruins came an unexpected light, as love and truth found their way back into our home. If you enjoy stories like this, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Now let me take you back to the day it all began, when the first strange call changed my life forever. The morning had started quietly, the kind of calm that made me believe the world still held peace for me. My name is Elena Vargas, and at 62 I had grown used to the gentle rhythm of life on the lake. The water shimmered through the trees at dawn, my old kettle whistled for tea, and the walls of my cottage held the laughter of my grandson Daniel whenever he visited after school. It was a steady, predictable life, the kind of life a woman builds after years of storms, or so I thought. That day the sunlight poured through the lace curtains, scattering soft patterns across the wooden floor. I had just finished preparing breakfast. My eldest son Adrian had already left for work as an engineer, leaving the house quiet except for Daniel's soft chatter about his favorite drawing. Mariana, my daughter-in-law, had gone upstairs to shower. Her voice drifted faintly down the staircase, humming a tune I had heard her sing many times before. It was an ordinary morning, and I was grateful for its simplicity. The landline rang its sharp chime, breaking the stillness. I dried my hands quickly and lifted the receiver. The familiar warmth of my younger son's voice filled the line. Lucas, my boy, who had always dreamed of flying, now a pilot who traveled from country to country, speaking with the same enthusiasm he carried as a child building toy planes in our backyard. Hearing him always felt like a blessing, a reminder that despite distance, family was never too far. We spoke lightly at first. He told me about the long flight ahead, about the weather over the Atlantic, about the passengers boarding one by one. I smiled, my heart full of pride. But then his tone shifted, lowering into something strained. He paused as if unsure whether to speak at all. "Mom," he said slowly, "something very strange just happened." My hand froze around the receiver. Strange was not a word Lucas used carelessly. His voice carried a weight that made my heart beat faster. "What is it, honey?" I asked, my voice steady, though my chest tightened. He hesitated, then spoke in a rush. "I just saw Mariana at the airport. She boarded my flight to Rome. I even have her passport in my hand." The words did not make sense at first. My mind rejected them as quickly as they were spoken. I turned my gaze toward the staircase where I could still hear water running in the bathroom. The melody of Mariana's humming floated down clear and soft. "Of course she is here," I said firmly. "Mariana is upstairs. She just told me she was going to take a shower." Silence followed on the line. Long, heavy silence broken only by the faint static of distance. Lucas's breathing came through slow and deliberate. When he spoke again, his tone was sharper, tinged with disbelief. "Mom, listen to me. I am holding her passport, her photo, her name. I watched her walk down the boarding gate. She is sitting in first class right now, and she is not alone. There is a man with her. They look close, too close." His words stabbed through me like ice. A man with her, a different life unfolding thousands of miles away, while another voice identical called out upstairs in my house. My knees weakened, and I clutched the receiver with trembling hands. "No, you must be mistaken," I whispered, but even as I spoke, doubt crept in like a shadow. Lucas sighed heavily. "Mom, I am looking at her this very moment. She is here. There is no mistake." The walls around me seemed to close in. The sunlight felt harsh now, glaring through the curtains. I could not breathe. My body trembled, yet I forced my voice calm, afraid Mariana might hear. "All right, son," I said weakly. "We will talk later. Be safe." I hung up the phone, but my hands would not stop shaking. The receiver nearly slipped from my grasp. The room spun. I pressed my palm against the table to steady myself, but the weight in my chest grew heavier. At that exact moment, the sound of water upstairs ceased. The bathroom door creaked open. I heard Mariana's footsteps on the stairs, light and steady, as if nothing in the world were wrong. Her voice drifted down. Mom, who was on the phone. I forced myself to answer quickly, hiding the tremor in my words. Just a friend. She appeared at the top of the staircase, her hair damp, a soft smile on her lips. The same Mariana I had seen countless times, the one who tucked Daniel into bed and stirred soup on the stove. There was no reason to doubt her, and yet every reason to doubt everything. She asked if I needed anything from the market, her tone warm, her gestures ordinary. Then she left, basket in hand, closing the gate softly behind her. I stood in the kitchen doorway, staring at the empty space where she had just stood, my heart pounding with a confusion I could not name. Lucas had never lied to me. He had no reason to. His voice had been so certain, so insistent. He was staring at her on the plane. I had heard her in my home. Two truths colliding, each undeniable yet impossible to exist together. I sat on the couch, clutching the edge of the cushion, replaying every detail in my mind. The shower, the passport, the man beside her, the smile she gave me before leaving. The pieces clashed like shards of broken glass, cutting into every certainty I had ever known. My eyes wandered to the photographs hanging on the wall. Adrian and Mariana on their wedding day, Daniel as a newborn in her arms, Lucas in his pilot uniform the first day he took to the skies. They had once represented happiness milestones, the story of a family bound by love. But as I looked now, a fog of doubt clouded them. What if those smiles were lies? What if everything I believed about Mariana was only a mask? The kettle whistled faintly on the stove, but I did not rise to tend to it. My mind was consumed by a single haunting question. If Mariana was upstairs, who was on that plane with my son, and if Mariana was on the plane who had just spoken to me with the same voice, the same face, the same smile. The lake outside shimmered under the midday sun, but I felt no peace. The surface might have been calm, yet beneath it, there could have been endless depths hiding unseen storms. That night, as I lay awake in bed, I could still hear Lucas's voice echoing through my mind. She is here. She is with another man. She is sitting in first class. The images would not leave me, and every time I closed my eyes I saw two Marianas, one laughing, one silent, one nurturing, one cruel. Which was real? Which was the shadow? When dawn came again, I rose with an unease that would not loosen its grip. I tried to tell myself it was all a mistake, but deep down I knew the truth. Something was terribly wrong in my home. And soon the smallest details in Mariana's behavior would begin to reveal themselves like cracks in a mirror, spreading wider with every touch, forcing me to confront a mystery I was not prepared to face. The morning after that unsettling call, I tried to move about my day as if nothing had happened. I made tea, folded laundry, and swept the floor, but no matter what I did, my mind returned to the same image. Lucas sitting in the cockpit, swearing he saw Mariana with another man, her passport in his hands. And here in this very house, the sound of her voice, the warmth of her smile. I wanted to push it aside, to call it a misunderstanding, yet my heart would not let me rest. Mariana returned from the market that afternoon with her wicker basket. She placed it on the counter with the same gentle grace I had always admired. Tomatoes, onions, herbs, and fresh bread spilled out as she unpacked. She hummed a tune while arranging everything, as though the world outside and the world inside were perfectly in harmony. I wanted so desperately to believe her. But my eyes, sharpened by unease, noticed something I had overlooked before. She set the basket on the table with her left hand. It might have meant nothing. Perhaps she was tired. Perhaps she simply shifted her weight. Yet the memory of her always using her right hand lingered. Years of chopping vegetables, brushing Daniel's hair, writing lists. Always the right. I told myself not to make too much of it, but the seed of doubt had already been planted. That evening the family gathered around the table. Adrian returned late, exhausted from work, but happy to see Daniel. He asked him about school, and the boy excitedly described a picture he had drawn of a bird. Mariana smiled, offered him more soup, and reminded Adrian of the upcoming parent-teacher meeting. For a while it all seemed normal. I sat quietly watching her every movement, searching for cracks in the mask. 3 nights later during dinner the mask slipped. Daniel accidentally knocked over a glass of water, spilling it across the tablecloth. I reached for a rag, laughing softly, telling him it was no problem. He was only 7 after all. But Mariana's face hardened. Her voice, sharp and cutting, filled the room. "Daniel, why are you so clumsy? Can you not be more careful?" The boy's eyes filled with tears, his small shoulders trembling. Adrian frowned, defending him. "It was an accident, Mariana. He is only a child." Her eyes flashed with anger. "You always defend him." "That leaves me looking like the villain in this house." The atmosphere collapsed into heavy silence. I held Daniel close, whispering comfort, though my own chest ached. Only a week ago she had sung him to sleep with tenderness. Now she was lashing out at him over a spilled glass. 2 faces, 2 hearts inside the same woman. From then on, I watched closely. I began noticing the smallest things. Some mornings Mariana wrote grocery lists with a steady right hand, neat letters lined in perfect rows. Other times she picked up the pen with her left, and the writing slanted awkwardly as if forced. When I asked her about it once, she laughed and brushed it off. "Just practicing, Mom, trying something new." I nodded, but the explanation felt thin. Daniel, too, started making remarks that pierced deeper than he realized. "Grandma," he whispered one evening, "sometimes my mom hugs me so tight, but other times she will not even look at me. Yesterday she helped me with homework, and her writing was so pretty. Today she told me to do it alone, and it looked ugly." I kissed his head, forcing a smile. "Your mother is just busy, my love. Do not be sad." But his innocent words echoed in me long after he had gone to bed. Children notice more than we think, and Daniel had seen the same contradiction I had. The neighbors noticed as well. One afternoon, Mrs. Hale, who lived 2 houses down, returned a dish Mariana had lent her. She smiled kindly, but her eyes narrowed with curiosity. "Your daughter-in-law is very kind," she said, "but yesterday when she gave me this dish, she used her left hand. I thought she was right-handed. Strange as she both." I forced a laugh, masking the unease twisting in my stomach. "Perhaps. You know young people always trying new things." She accepted my tea, but her words lingered like thorns. Later that week, Mr. Connors, the baker, pulled me aside while I bought bread for Daniel. He lowered his voice. "Your daughter-in-law is unusual. She came last week all smiles, complimenting my bread. But yesterday morning she returned with a frown, said nothing, and left without even a thank you. I thought perhaps something was wrong at home. I shook my head quickly, telling him she must have been tired. But as I walked home with the warm loaf in my basket, my pulse quickened. It was not only me, others were seeing it too. That evening, as I sat with my notebook, I began to record the details. 3 o'clock, Mariana leaves for market, returns at 6 in a blue blouse, though she left in white, attitude irritable. Yesterday sang Daniel to sleep. Today cold, no song. Right hand, neat writing. Left hand, uneven scrawl. Each line felt heavier than the last, as though I were engraving suspicion into the paper. The more I wrote, the more the pattern emerged. 2 faces, 2 ways of being, 2 lives colliding under one name. One night after dinner, the mask cracked again. Mariana took out a small notebook from her bag and began writing something quickly with her left hand. Adrian glanced over and chuckled. "Since when do you write with your left hand? It looks odd." For a moment, panic flashed in her eyes. She forced a smile. "Just experimenting, dear." She closed the notebook too quickly, tucking it away. Adrian said nothing more, but I knew he had noticed as well. The house no longer felt safe. It felt like a stage where one actress played 2 roles, switching masks without warning. I did not know which version of Mariana would appear at the table each night, the warm mother or the cold stranger. Days turned into weeks, and the contradictions grew sharper. Some mornings she greeted me with affection, other mornings she barely acknowledged me. Some afternoons she returned from the market cheerful, other times sullen with explanations that never quite fit. I caught her once, leaving in her pale yellow dress, only to see her return later in a different blouse, claiming she had spilled something. My suspicion deepened with every shift, every glance, every word. One night after Daniel had gone to bed, I stood at the window staring at the moonlit lake. My reflection in the glass looked weary, lined with questions. I asked myself if I was imagining it all, if age was twisting my mind into seeing ghosts where none existed. But then I remembered Lucas's voice, urgent and unshakable. "She is here. She is sitting in first class. She is with another man." No, I was not imagining this. Something far darker was unfolding under my roof. And soon the truth would push me beyond silent observation. For the strange details of Mariana's shifting hands and shifting moods were only the beginning. The next discovery would take me into the streets, following her footsteps where shadows waited and the mystery deepened. The days that followed stretched long and heavy, filled with small discoveries that pressed against my chest like stones. Every detail I had written in my notebook haunted me when I tried to sleep. Right hand, left hand. Warmth one moment, coldness the next. A white blouse at midday, a blue blouse by evening. And always that question I could not silence. Who was the real Mariana? It was not just inside the house where these shadows grew. Beyond the walls of our home, whispers began to follow me like echoes. One morning as I walked down the cobblestone path to return a borrowed jar, Mrs. Hale waved from her porch. She was a kind woman, always offering me fresh herbs from her garden. That day, her smile carried curiosity more than kindness. "Elena," she said, "your daughter-in-law is very sweet, but I have to tell you something odd. Yesterday she came to my house cheerful, asking about my grandchildren. Today she walked by without so much as a nod. She looked straight at me, but her eyes seemed empty, as if she had never seen me before. Is she all right?" I forced a smile and answered softly, "She must have been in a hurry, you know how young women are these days." But inside my stomach twisted. Mrs. Hale had no reason to invent such a story, and her words matched exactly what I had already seen with my own eyes. That afternoon I stopped by the bakery for Daniel's favorite rolls. The scent of fresh bread drifted into the street as I stepped inside. Mr. Connors greeted me with his usual booming cheer, but his expression quickly shifted to concern. "Mrs. Vargas, forgive me for asking, but is everything well at home?" I hesitated, heart thudding. "What do you mean?" "Your daughter-in-law," he said carefully. "Last week she praised my bread with a smile, called it the best she had tasted, but just yesterday morning she came again. She bought the same loaf, yet her face was hard, her tone sharp, as though she resented even being there. She did not even say thank you. It unsettled me. I gripped my basket tightly and forced a polite reply. She must have been tired." But my voice trembled, betraying the truth. Walking back, I felt the street narrow around me. Each remark from the neighbors confirmed what I had feared. This was not my imagination, nor was it the weariness of age. Others saw it too. They had noticed the fracture in Mariana's face, the way her presence shifted like sand in the wind. That evening, as I prepared tea, Daniel came running in with his notebook. "Grandma, look," he said with excitement. "Mom helped me yesterday, and her letters were so pretty. Today she helped again, but her writing looked different. See, this page is neat, but this page is messy." He pointed to two entries side by side, one filled with tidy, graceful letters, the other crooked, uneven. My throat closed as I studied them. "Your mother was probably tired, my dear," I murmured, stroking his hair. But inside I felt the sharp edge of truth pressing deeper. Even a child could see it. Two different hands, two different mothers. Later that night, I sat in the quiet living room. The lamplight cast long shadows on the walls, and the ticking of the old clock was the only sound. I opened my notebook and added Daniel's observation to the list. His words, innocent, yet piercing, felt like another nail sealing a box of secrets I could no longer keep shut. The next morning, as I stepped outside to water the plants, Mrs. Jensen, who sold vegetables at the market, approached me with her usual bright smile. She carried a bundle of cilantro in her arms. "What a coincidence, Mrs. Vargas," she said. "I saw your daughter-in-law twice this week. On Monday she was so kind, even bought an extra bunch of cilantro and laughed about trying a new recipe. But this morning she returned with such a serious face. She barely spoke, just paid and left. I almost thought she was a different person." Her words struck me like a bell. Different person. That was exactly what it felt like. I thanked her quickly, forcing calm, but once she left I stood frozen at the gate, staring down the street Mariana often walked. Each remark from the neighbors formed a chorus I could not ignore. They all saw what I saw. A woman shifting between kindness and coldness, warmth and distance, familiarity and strangeness. That evening at dinner, Daniel spoke with his innocent voice, his eyes wide with confusion. "Grandma, yesterday my mom sang me the song you always sing, the one about the little bird. It was so pretty. But tonight she would not sing at all. She just told me to go to sleep." My spoon nearly slipped from my hand. That song was mine. A lullaby I had sung to Adrian and Lucas when they were children. Only Mariana had heard it often enough to learn it. Or so I believed. Why did she sing it one day and not the next? Why was Daniel the one noticing the difference when the rest of us pretended it was normal? I excused myself from the table, heart racing, and retreated to my room. My notebook lay open on the desk, each entry like a wound bleeding on paper. White blouse, blue blouse, right hand, left hand, sweet voice, harsh tone, cheerful one day, silent the next. The pieces no longer looked scattered. They were aligning into a shape, a terrible shape I could not yet name. One afternoon, soon after I visited Mrs. Hale again to return her dish, she welcomed me in for tea and we sat at her small table. Her eyes softened with sympathy as she leaned closer. "Forgive me for saying this, Elena, but has your daughter-in-law changed? She used to greet me warmly. Now some days she looks right through me as if I do not exist." I nodded weakly, my voice a whisper. "You are not the only one who has noticed." Her words were another stone dropping into the lake of my doubts, sending ripples outward. On the way home I passed the market again. The stalls bustled with life voices calling, children laughing. Yet the world around me felt hollow. Every laugh, every call was drowned by the memory of Lucas's voice over the phone. "She is sitting in first class with another man." That night I could not sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every comment, every moment. The neighbors, Daniel, even Adrian's brief glance when he noticed her handwriting. We were all seeing it, but none of us spoke aloud what we truly feared. By dawn I knew I could no longer stay still. Watching and recording was not enough. If I wanted to protect Adrian and Daniel, if I wanted to uncover what was truly happening under my roof, I would have to step beyond observation. I would have to follow Mariana. The decision was not made lightly. For days I tried to silence the thought, convincing myself that a mother-in-law had no right to shadow her son's wife like a thief. Yet the doubt in my chest only grew heavier. Each smile Mariana gave me felt rehearsed, each word measured. Her movements seemed like a performance, and I began to wonder who exactly she was performing for. Finally, one hot afternoon when the cicadas whined from the trees and Daniel had gone to a friend's house after school, I wrapped my old shawl over my shoulders, hiding my face just enough, and resolved to follow her. Mariana came downstairs in a pale yellow dress sprinkled with tiny flowers. She looked radiant, almost too radiant, her hair brushed to perfection, her wicker basket swinging lightly from her arm. She kissed my cheek, her smile as warm as the first day she entered this family. "Mom, I am going to the market. Do you need anything?" My voice was steady, though my heart hammered. "Just some tomatoes, dear." The moment the gate closed behind her, I slipped outside, keeping my distance, as I followed her along the narrow cobblestone street that curved past the lake. My heart pounded with every step. What if she turned and saw me? What if I discovered something I could never forget? But my legs carried me forward, my hands gripping the edge of my shawl. At first, she walked the familiar route toward the market, weaving through the bustle of families and vendors. I nearly turned back, ashamed of my suspicion. Yet when we reached the corner where the street forked, she did something she had never done before. She did not turn right toward the stalls brimming with vegetables and bread. Instead, she turned left, slipping into a narrow alley that led away from the market toward the old industrial quarter. I froze. My breath caught. That alley was lined with crumbling warehouses and rusted fences, a place where shadows lingered even in daylight. Why would she go there? Forcing my feet to move, I followed slowly, keeping far behind. The air grew heavier as we entered the quarter. Paint peeled from the walls of abandoned shops and broken glass glittered on the ground. Mariana's yellow dress swayed ahead of me, bright against the gray ruins. She walked quickly as if she knew exactly where she was going. She stopped before a rusted metal door, its paint blistered with age. She glanced around once, and I ducked behind a stack of bicycles leaning against a fence. My heart nearly leapt from my chest. Then with a soft knock, she pushed the door open and slipped inside. I stood frozen in the alley, my pulse thundering in my ears. Every instinct screamed at me to run after her, to fling the door wide and demand the truth. Yet my legs would not move. Fear held me in place. What if I discovered something I could not bear to know? What if the woman I had welcomed into my family carried secrets darker than betrayal? Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. Finally, I forced myself to leave my steps heavy, each one dragging me back toward the safety of home. But safety was an illusion. When I pushed the gate open and stepped into the kitchen, I froze. Mariana was already there. She stood by the counter, chopping vegetables in a crisp white blouse, her face calm, her eyes sharp as she looked up at me. "Where did you go, Mom? You were just getting back." My throat dried. I could not speak. I had just seen her enter that building in her yellow dress. How could she now be here as if she had never left? The knife in her hand glinted under the light, her eyes narrowing just slightly as if she were reading every flicker of fear on my face. I forced a weak smile. "I only went for a walk." She nodded slowly, turning back to the cutting board. But the way she gripped the knife, the way her jaw tightened, told me she knew I had noticed something. That night, sleep refused to come. I lay in bed with the ceiling pressing down, replaying the scene over and over. Mariana in the yellow dress stepping through the rusted door. Mariana in the white blouse waiting in my kitchen. Two images that could not exist together, yet both burned into my mind. Perhaps I told myself desperately. Perhaps she had changed clothes quickly. Perhaps there was a simple explanation. Yet the memory of her sharp eyes, the way she asked where I had been, haunted me. It was as if she had been testing me, daring me to confront her. The following evening, Daniel ran to me with tears streaking his cheeks. "Grandma," he sobbed, "Mom yelled at me for dropping a pencil." Yesterday she hugged me so tight, but today she would not even look at me. I held him close, my heart aching. My poor boy caught in the middle of something none of us understood. I stroked his hair, whispering that his mother was just tired, but my voice trembled, betraying the fear I carried. That night, unable to bear the weight of my doubts, I returned to my notebook. My hand shook as I wrote. 3:00, Mariana leaves in yellow dress, seen entering old warehouse. 6:00, found in kitchen, wearing white blouse. Attitude cold. When the words were finished, I sat staring at the page, my chest tight. For weeks I had filled the notebook with small details, but now the entries formed a single, undeniable picture. I was not living with one woman, but with two. The next morning I rose with determination. I could not let the truth hide behind shadows any longer. I would return to that alley, to that rusted door, and face whatever waited on the other side. The sun was bright, but the air carried a chill as I walked. The cobblestones echoed beneath my feet, each step a drumbeat of fear and resolve. When I reached the quarter, the warehouses loomed taller than before, their windows blank like watching eyes. My shawl clung to my shoulders, but no cloth could shield me from the dread curling in my stomach. I paused at the corner, gathering courage. Then I stepped forward, heart hammering, until I stood once again before the rusted door where Mariana had vanished. I raised my hand and knocked. For a moment, silence. Then the door creaked open, and my breath caught in my throat. Standing before me was a woman identical to Mariana. The same eyes, the same lips, the same dark hair flowing over her shoulders. But her expression was different. Frightened, uncertain, her hands trembling as she clutched a rag. I stared at her, unable to speak. The world tilted, the alley spinning around me. Two faces, one body. It was impossible. I managed a single word, my voice breaking. "Mariana." The woman shook her head, her lips parting as tears welled in her eyes. "No," she whispered. "My name is Isla." The name struck me like thunder. My knees weakened. My heart pounded as if it might tear free. Behind her I heard another voice, soft but firm, urging her. "Isla, do not hide anymore. She deserves to know." My world spun the ground, slipping away beneath me. The truth was there, standing in front of me, wearing the face I thought I knew. And as I stepped hesitantly across the threshold, I realized my family's life would never again be the same. The dim light of the warehouse house spilled across the floor as the door closed behind me. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant, mixed with the stale scent of damp wood and rust. I stood frozen just inside the threshold, staring at the woman who looked exactly like Mariana. Every detail of her face mirrored my daughter-in-law's: the curve of her cheek, the dark gleam of her eyes, even the slight tilt of her head when she hesitated to speak. Yet her expression was nothing like the woman I knew. Fear lived in her gaze, guilt clung to her trembling hands. I clutched the back of a wooden chair to steady myself. My voice came out in a whisper, breaking with disbelief. "Who are you?" The woman lowered her head, twisting the rag in her hands. "My name is Isla Navarro," she said quietly. "I am not your daughter-in-law." My breath caught in my throat. Not Mariana. But the face before me was the very one I had seen smiling across the dinner table, the same face that kissed Daniel goodnight, the same face that looked at me with both warmth and sharpness. Before I could gather my thoughts, another figure stepped forward from the shadows. A younger woman with neat hair tied in a bun, her eyes calm but firm. She placed a hand on Isla's shoulder. "I am Clara, her roommate. Please, Mrs. Vargas, sit. It is time you hear the truth." I let them guide me to a worn wooden chair. My knees felt weak, my hands cold against the table. I looked at Isla again, unable to tear my eyes away from the impossible resemblance. "Speak," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Tell me why you look like her. Tell me why you are in my home." Isla flinched but nodded. Tears welled in her eyes as she began. "Some years ago," she whispered, "I met Mariana by chance at the market. She was shocked when she saw me, as I was when I saw her. We looked like mirrors. From that day forward, she sought me out. At first she was kind. She said fate had made us cross paths, that maybe we were connected somehow. But then she asked me for something." Her words faltered, and Clara gently urged her to continue. "She asked me to pretend to be her Isla," said her voice breaking. "She said it would only be for a few hours at a time. Go to the market in her place, stay with the boy when she had to leave suddenly. She paid me well more than I could ever earn on my own. My adoptive father is sick bedridden, and I needed the money for his medicine. I did not ask questions. I thought it was harmless. But I was wrong." Her tears slipped down her cheeks, falling onto the rag she still clutched. I stared at her, my heart torn between fury and pity. Pretend to be her. Take her place. How many times had this woman stepped into my home smiling as if she belonged, while the real Mariana was somewhere else? "Where does she go?" I pressed. "Where is she when you are in my house?" Isla shook her head helplessly. "She never told me. I only know she gives me instructions and money. Sometimes she vanishes for hours, sometimes for days. I thought it was not my place to know more." Clara leaned closer, her voice firm. "But I saw something, Mrs. Vargas." One afternoon I accompanied Isla when Mariana asked her to wait outside a cafe. I went in to buy tea, and there she was. Mariana seated with a man. His name is Victor Callahan. I only know it because I heard them call each other honey, speaking so intimately it left no doubt. The name rang through my chest like a bell of doom. Lucas's words echoed in my memory. "She is sitting in first class beside a man close, too close." The room tilted around me. I clutched the edge of the table, trying to anchor myself. My daughter-in-law, the woman I had trusted as part of my family, had been living a life behind our backs. And this frightened young woman before me, was she her accomplice or another victim of her schemes? My voice shook as I turned back to Isla. "Do you understand what you have done? You stepped into my home, into my grandson's life, pretending to be his mother. Do you realize the confusion you have caused?" Isla wept openly now, her words spilling with regret. "I know. I am sorry. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I only wanted to buy medicine for my parents." Mariana promised it was harmless, that no one would ever know. I was a fool to believe her. Her face mirrored Mariana's, yet the pain in her eyes was raw and genuine. I saw not the cold sharpness I had begun to fear in my daughter-in-law, but the sorrow of a woman trapped in desperation. I rose slowly, my legs trembling. "If what you say is true, then Mariana has deceived us all. But this is not the end, Isla. You must tell me everything you know. Every time she asked you to stand in her place. Every word she spoke." She nodded, her tears soaking the rag in her hands. "I will tell you everything." Clara placed a cup of water before me, her voice steady. "Mrs. Vargas, you must understand. Isla is not the villain here. She has been used. Your daughter-in-law is hiding something much larger than you realize." I sipped the water, though my throat was tight. My mind was a storm of images. Mariana's smile across the dinner table, her sudden cruelty toward Daniel, her voice on the stairs. And now Isla's confession, the mirror image of her face breaking down before me. I could not stay longer. My chest felt too heavy, my breath too shallow. I stood thanking Clara with a nod, though my voice would not come. I turned to Isla, looking into eyes so familiar and yet so foreign. "I do not forgive you," I said softly, "but I see your pain. If you want to make this right, you will help me uncover the truth." Her sobs shook her shoulders, but she nodded. "Yes, I will help." I stepped out into the blinding sunlight. The alley stretched silent before me, but the world no longer looked the same. Two women with one face, a secret life with another man, and an innocent child caught in the middle of it all. As I walked home, the weight of what I had learned pressed heavier with each step. This was not merely about strange moods or shifting hands. It was about deception at its deepest level, betrayal that cut into the very heart of my family. And though I dreaded what lay ahead, I knew I could not stop. For if Mariana could deceive me, if she could deceive Adrian and Daniel, then what else was she capable of hiding? The answers lay in shadows I had only just begun to uncover. And soon I would discover a truth more devastating than I could ever have imagined. The night after meeting Isla, sleep refused to come. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling beams, while the clock ticked like a hammer against my thoughts. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw two faces that were one. Mariana at my dinner table, her eyes cold as steel. Isla in the dim light of that shabby house, her eyes brimming with guilt and sorrow. They were identical in every way, except for the heart that shone through their expressions. By dawn, I knew I could not ignore what I had learned. The truth would not let me rest, and the only way to find peace was to dig deeper, no matter how much it might hurt. I wrapped my shawl around my shoulders and returned to that alley, my steps heavy yet determined. The same rusted door creaked open, but this time Isla did not hesitate. She welcomed me with eyes still swollen from crying. Clara was there too, setting a kettle on the stove in their cramped kitchen. The smell of disinfectant and damp wood filled the air. In the corner, I noticed a frail man coughing weakly on a cot, his body wrapped in a threadbare blanket. "Mrs. Vargas," Isla said softly, "I knew you would come back. There is more you should know." I followed her to a small room at the back, where an older woman lay in bed, her hair completely white, her eyes clouded with age and illness. "This is my adoptive mother," Isla explained. "She raised me since I was a baby." The woman's hand trembled as she reached for mine. "I am Mrs. Jones," she said in a thin whisper. "Isla is not my blood, though I love her as if she were. She was given to me as a newborn." Her words froze me where I stood. Given as a newborn. My breath caught as I leaned closer. "Please," I urged, "tell me everything." Her voice faltered between shallow breaths, but she forced the story out. "Many years ago, I worked as a nurse in a small hospital outside this city. One night, a poor couple came in. The mother had given birth to twins, two little girls, but they were destitute. The father said they could not feed both. The mother wept, saying she could only keep one. They planned to abandon the other." My heart stopped. "Twins." Mrs. Jones's voice shook as she continued. "I could not let that baby die. I took her in, adopted her as my own. That baby is Isla." I staggered back, gripping the edge of the bed frame. "Twins." The word echoed in my skull louder and louder until it drowned out everything else. Two girls born together, separated by desperation. One raised in comfort, the other in poverty. And now both standing in my life, tangled in a web of lies. "Do you know who the parents were?" I asked, my voice trembling. Mrs. Jones shook her head weakly. "I only know they were from a nearby town. They vanished after that night. I never saw them again." I turned to Isla, who stood with tears streaming down her cheeks. Her voice broke as she whispered, "When I met Mariana for the first time, I thought maybe she knew something about where I came from. She looked at me like she had seen a ghost, but she never told me anything. Instead, she used me. She asked me to step into her life so she could disappear into hers. The truth sank into me like a blade. Mariana had not only betrayed her husband and child, she had betrayed her own flesh and blood, using her twin as a shield for her secrets. I sank into a chair, clutching my head. The pieces fit together now, the shifting moods, the left and right hand, the sudden changes of clothing. It was not just Mariana changing her mask. It was Isla stepping into the role, trying to imitate a life that was never hers. Clara placed a steaming cup of tea before me, her eyes filled with quiet sympathy. "You see now, Mrs. Vargas, Isla is not the cause. She is a victim too." I looked at Isla, seeing not the mirror of Mariana, but a broken young woman caught in chains she had never asked for. My anger softened into sorrow. I reached across the table, taking her trembling hand. "Isla," I said gently, "you cannot let your sister use you any longer. You deserve better. But I need your help. My son and my grandson must know the truth. Will you stand with me?" She bowed her head, sobbing, but she nodded. "I will. I do not want to live this lie anymore." Her words struck something deep inside me, a glimmer of resolve I had not felt in weeks. For the first time since Lucas's phone call, I felt a path forward. Painful, yes. Dangerous, yes. But a path nonetheless. As I left the house that day, clutching a faded hospital record Mrs. Jones had given me with Isla's birth date, I felt the world tilt again. The date matched exactly the one on Mariana's marriage papers, which I had once glanced at when she wed Adrian. Same day, same year. Twins beyond doubt. The walk back to my cottage felt heavier than ever. The market buzzed with laughter and chatter, yet the sounds felt far away, muffled by the storm inside me. How would Adrian bear it when he learned his wife had lied not only about her fidelity, but about her very identity? How would Daniel endure knowing his mother had used her own sister as a mask? That night I sat at the dining table alone, staring at the candlelight flickering against the window. The reflection of my face stared back, weary and lined with fear, yet behind it the faintest glimmer of steel. For years I had built this family on trust, believing love was enough to hold us together. But Mariana had torn through that trust like a blade through cloth. Now it was up to me to gather the pieces and stitch them back together, even if the seams would forever bear scars. I thought of Daniel's innocent face, his questions about why his mother changed from one day to the next. I thought of Adrian's quiet devotion, his blind faith in a woman who had already betrayed him. And I thought of Lucas, who had seen the truth from above the clouds, his warning the spark that ignited this terrible revelation. My hand tightened on the hospital papers. Twins. One raised in shadow, one raised in light. Their paths had crossed again, but not for love, not for reunion, for deceit, for betrayal. The truth was no longer a whisper. It was a storm pressing against the windows of my home, demanding to be faced. And soon I would have no choice but to bring both sisters into the light, no matter how much destruction the truth would leave behind. The days after learning the truth about Isla and Mariana passed in a haze. I moved through the house like a woman carrying a secret too heavy to bear, each step slow, each breath tight in my chest. The papers Mrs. Jones had given me lay hidden in my drawer, their faded ink, a constant reminder that two lives had begun as one. I knew the time for silence was ending. My son Adrian deserved to know who his wife truly was. Daniel, though only a child, deserved honesty rather than confusion. And Lucas, who had been the first to raise the alarm, needed to see the truth revealed before his own eyes. One evening, as the sun sank low and painted the lake in streaks of red, I stood in the kitchen preparing dinner. My hands moved automatically, chopping herbs and stirring soup, but my mind was elsewhere. Every slice of the knife felt like a countdown. Tomorrow night, I told myself. Tomorrow everything must come out. I spent the next day in quiet preparation. I laid a clean white cloth on the table, polished the old silverware, and lit candles, though it was not a holiday. I roasted fish the way Daniel loved, and made chili the way Adrian always asked for. To anyone else it would look like a feast. To me it was the setting for judgment. As dusk settled, the family gathered. Adrian came home tired but smiling faintly when he saw the table. "What are we celebrating, Mom?" he asked, loosening his tie. I forced a smile. "We are celebrating family," I said simply. Mariana entered soon after, her pale blue dress flowing softly, her smile faint but her eyes restless. She kissed Adrian on the cheek, then smoothed Daniel's hair with a tenderness that seemed almost too perfect, as if she sensed the storm that was waiting. Daniel clapped his hands when he saw the fish, his laughter, the only pure sound in that tense room. I stroked his head, my heart aching, knowing his innocent smile would not last much longer. We sat down to eat, and for a while the conversation was light. Adrian spoke of a project at work. Daniel showed a drawing he had made, and Mariana nodded at all the right moments. But beneath it all, silence stretched like a shadow waiting to pounce. At last, when the plates were half empty and the candles flickered low, I drew a deep breath. It is time, I thought. I rose slowly and walked to the door where Lucas was waiting outside. He stepped in his pilot's uniform, crisp, his eyes sharp, with the same urgency I had heard over the phone weeks before. And behind him, Isla entered quietly, her face pale, her hands trembling. The room froze. Daniel gasped, his fork clattering against his plate. "Why are there two moms?" he asked in a trembling voice, his eyes darting between Mariana and Isla. Adrian's face went white. He dropped his spoon, staring at Isla as though he had seen a ghost. Mariana shot to her feet, her voice rising in fury. "What is this?" she demanded, her eyes flashing toward me. "What game are you playing, Mom?" I steadied myself against the table, forcing my voice to remain firm. "Sit down, Mariana. It is time we clear everything." I told them everything, my words heavy yet unstoppable. Lucas's call from the airport, the passport in his hand, the strange changes I had recorded in my notebook, the days when Mariana's tenderness vanished, replaced by cruelty, the times she wrote with her right hand and then her left, the clothes that changed, the moods that shifted. And finally my visit to the alley, where I had found Isla, the mirror of her face, and the papers that proved they had once been one life before being torn apart. "You and Isla are twin sisters," I said, my voice steady though my heart was breaking. "You used her to hide your secrets, to cover your absences, but tonight the truth must be spoken." The silence that followed was unbearable. Adrian's face crumpled as though the ground had opened beneath him. Daniel's eyes filled with tears, confusion clouding his innocent gaze. Mariana's lips trembled, her face pale as parchment. Then her fury erupted like a storm. "She is lying. She made this up to humiliate me. How dare you?" Before I could answer, Lucas stepped forward and laid a stack of papers on the table with a thud. "This," he said coldly, "is a copy of your electronic passport, stamped with your departure and arrival in Rome. You cannot be at home and in another country at the same time." Mariana's eyes darted to the papers, her mouth tightening, but she said nothing. Daniel's small voice broke the silence. "Grandma," he whispered, "some days my mom is an angel, and other days she is really mean. I do not like the mean mom." His words cut through me like a blade. I pulled him close, holding him as tears burned in my eyes. The air grew heavier, pressing on us all. Then another voice joined in from the doorway. Clara stepped inside, her eyes sharp, her words clear. "I saw Mariana with Victor Callahan. They called each other honey. He is the man she disappears with." Adrian turned to his wife, his voice breaking. "Is it true, Mariana? Tell me it is not true." For a moment she stood frozen, her chest heaving, her eyes flickering from one face to another. Then she snapped, "Yes, it is true. I have a lover. I am tired of this life, tired of pretending. Victor gives me a life 100 times better than this one, and you, Adrian, you are nothing compared to him." The words exploded in the room like a bomb. Adrian staggered back as if struck, his fists clenching until his knuckles turned white. Daniel burst into sobs and clung to me, his small body trembling. I kissed his hair, tears spilling down my cheeks. I looked at Mariana, at the coldness in her eyes, and realized the woman I had once welcomed into my family no longer existed. She stood before us, stripped of pretense, her mask shattered, and there was nothing left but betrayal. Adrian's voice trembled as he asked one final time, "Do you truly believe that, Mariana? Do you truly believe we are nothing?" She glared at him, her face twisted with anger. She did not answer. Instead, she turned on her heel and stormed out the door, slamming behind her with a finality that shook the walls. The silence that followed was suffocating. Isla stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. Sister, you did not have to hurt them like this. I only wanted to help you. I never knew you would use me to deceive them." Her words hung in the air unanswered. Mariana was gone, leaving behind nothing but wreckage. I looked around the table, at Adrian, whose face was pale with shock, at Daniel, whose tears soaked my blouse, at Lucas standing tall but stricken, at Isla trembling yet filled with sorrow. The family I had fought to protect now sat in ruins. And though the truth had been spoken, its price was heavier than I had ever imagined. I knew this night was only the beginning. The path ahead would be darker still. The days that followed the confrontation were like living inside the shell of a house after a storm had torn through. The walls still stood, the rooms still held their furniture, but the warmth was gone. Silence clung to every corner. The laughter that once echoed from Daniel's games, the steady rhythm of Adrian's voice, sharing his work, even the casual hum of Mariana's presence, all of it had vanished, leaving only a void. Adrian moved through the house like a shadow. He spoke little, ate less, and carried himself with the weight of a man who had been hollowed out. When I looked into his eyes, I saw the same emptiness I had seen in my husband Raphael's gaze in his final days, the look of someone who had lost the one thing he thought he could hold forever. Daniel felt the absence more keenly than anyone. At night, he crawled into my bed, clutching my arm as tears stained my pillow. "Grandma," he whispered one evening, "why did my mom leave? Did I make her angry? Did I do something wrong?" I held him tightly, my heart breaking. "No, my love. You did nothing wrong. Your mother made choices that had nothing to do with you." But my words, though true, felt thin against the heaviness of his grief. He was only 7. How could I explain betrayal to a child still learning the meaning of trust? A week later, Adrian and Mariana stood in the courthouse. I did not go, though I waited at home, my hands trembling, until he returned. When he walked through the door, his face was pale, his shoulders stiff. "It is done," he said simply. She signed the papers without looking at me or Daniel. She left with him with Victor, as if we had never been her family at all. His voice cracked, but no tears came. He sank into the old armchair, staring at the floor, while Daniel clung to his leg, asking when his mother would return. Adrian could not answer, and so I did, promising Daniel that, though one parent had gone, he would never lack love. The days stretched into weeks, and slowly the wounds began to scar. Mariana did not call. She did not write. She vanished from our lives, as if she had been nothing but a phantom wearing the mask of family. The pain of her absence was sharp at first, then dull, then heavy like a stone, lodged permanently in our chests. But even in the emptiness, a light began to flicker. That light was Isla. She started visiting quietly, almost timidly at first, carrying containers of warm food or small toys for Daniel. She sat with him at the table, helping him with homework, her handwriting careful and neat as she guided his small hands. She listened to his stories, laughed at his jokes, and wiped his tears when he asked about the mother who had vanished. At first, Adrian avoided her, the resemblance too painful. But Daniel, in his innocent way, began to draw her close. One afternoon, he wrapped his arms around her waist and said with childlike simplicity, "Will you teach me how to draw a bird, Mom?" Isla froze, her eyes wide with shock, then softened with tears. She knelt and stroked his hair. "Of course, my love. We will draw the prettiest bird you have ever seen." I stood in the doorway watching the scene with tears spilling down my cheeks. For the first time in weeks, Daniel smiled, truly smiled, his grief eased by the tenderness Isla gave so freely. Adrian noticed too. Slowly, his distance faded. He began to watch Isla with cautious eyes, then with gratitude, and finally with something more. She was not Mariana, though she wore the same face. She was gentler, steadier, free of the sharpness and deceit that had poisoned our home. One evening, as I washed dishes, Adrian called me into the living room. He stood holding a small ring in his trembling hands, his face pale but determined. Isla sat beside him, her cheeks flushed, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Mom," Adrian said, his voice breaking, "I do not want to waste any more time. Life is too short for lies. Isla has brought light back into this house, into Daniel's life, into mine. I love her. I want her to be my wife and Daniel's mother if she will accept." Isla's tears spilled over as she looked at me silently, asking for my blessing. My heart ached with the weight of all that had been lost, but in that moment I saw the truth. This woman had already become family not by blood alone, but by the love she gave without measure. I walked forward, took her hand in mine, and nodded. "You deserve it, my dear. You have already been part of us for longer than you realize." She threw her arms around me, sobbing into my shoulder, and I held her tightly. For the first time since the storm began, I felt hope flicker warm inside my chest. The wedding came quickly, a small gathering in the garden, with red roses tied to the fence. Daniel wore a tiny suit, beaming as he stood as his father's best man. Lucas returned from a flight just in time, standing tall beside his brother, his smile proud and wide. When Isla walked down the path in a simple white dress, holding Adrian's hand, tears blurred my vision. They were not tears of loss this time, but of renewal. I saw not the shadow of betrayal, but the light of a new beginning. From that day forward, life in our home slowly stitched itself back together. Isla cooked warm meals, sang Daniel to sleep with the same lullaby I once sang to my sons, and listened patiently as Adrian spoke of his projects. She did not try to replace Mariana. She simply gave herself fully with sincerity and love. Daniel stopped asking about his other mother. When he called Isla Mom, it came with joy rather than confusion. The hole Mariana had left remained, but it no longer bled. It had been filled with something softer, something real. At night I often sat on the porch, listening to the laughter drifting through the windows. Sometimes I heard Daniel giggling as Isla taught him to draw, or Adrian's quiet voice as he shared his dreams with her. Their voices blended into music, the kind that heals. The storm had left scars, yes, but it had also cleared the way for something purer. And though I still wondered sometimes what had driven Mariana to throw everything away, I no longer let her ghost haunt me. For in her absence we had found truth, and in truth we had found peace. But deep inside I knew this peace had not come freely. It had been bought with pain, with betrayal, with nights of tears and days of silence. And though we had begun to heal, the memory of that night of reckoning lingered, a reminder that trust once shattered can never be restored the same. As I looked at the faces around me, Adrian's steady gaze, Daniel's laughter, Isla's quiet devotion, I understood that we had survived not because of the woman who betrayed us, but because of the one who stayed when she had every reason to run. And so in the silence of my porch, I whispered a prayer of gratitude. The storm had taken much, but it had also given. We had lost Mariana, but we had gained Isla, and with her a chance at love that was finally true. The house grew quiet again in the months after the storm, but it was a different kind of quiet from the one that had once suffocated us. This quiet was filled with peace, the kind that settles after tears have been shed and wounds have begun to heal. The echoes of Daniel's laughter reached me as I sat on the porch in the evenings, and inside I heard Isla humming softly as she prepared tea for Adrian while he bent over his blueprints. I often found myself drifting into memories, retracing the long and painful path that had brought us here. It began with a single phone call, a voice on the other end of the line, telling me something I could not believe. From that moment, the world I thought I knew began to unravel thread by thread, until I was left holding nothing but questions and fear. The woman I had trusted as a daughter had turned out to be a stranger, hiding her betrayal behind the face of family. There were nights when I lay awake, still hearing Lucas's urgent words echoing in my mind. "Mom, she is sitting in first class. She is with another man." Those words had opened the door to a nightmare I had not been prepared to face. But now, looking back, I understood that they had also been the first light of truth piercing the darkness. I thought about all the small details that had once seemed insignificant. A blouse changed in the span of an afternoon. A hand that wrote neatly one day and crookedly the next. A lullaby sung on Tuesday but ignored on Wednesday. At the time, they were fragments that made me uneasy. Now they stood out like warning bells I had ignored for far too long. I still remembered the weight of my notebook, each shaky line I had written, each observation I had recorded. At first I thought I was clinging to madness, scribbling down suspicions no one would believe. But those words became my proof, the foundation of the truth that could not be denied. Without them, perhaps, I would have doubted myself into silence, and the deception would have lasted even longer. The hardest memories, of course, were of Daniel. his small voice asking why his mother had changed, his tears when he begged for the kind version of her, the one who hugged him and sang to him. No child should ever have to question which version of their mother they will find at the dinner table. That pain would stay with him, etched into his memory even as he healed under Isla's love. And then there was Adrian, my son, who bore his heartbreak with a quiet strength that nearly broke me. Watching him at the courthouse signing away the marriage he had once believed would last forever was like watching a man bury his own dreams. But even in his grief, he did not let bitterness consume him. He opened himself to light again, and that light came from the most unexpected place: Isla, the twin who had been abandoned at birth, the young woman who had been used as a pawn in her sister's deception, the mirror image of betrayal, yet carrying a heart so different from Mariana's. Where Mariana's gaze had grown cold, Isla's eyes shone with compassion. Where Mariana had built walls of lies, Isla offered truth even when it hurt. I sometimes thought about fate and how strange it can be. What were the chances that two girls torn apart as infants would one day cross paths again in such a way? That one would fall into the darkness of greed and deceit, while the other would find herself drawn into our family's life, not through malice but through desperation and love. It still pained me to remember the night of reckoning. The candles burning low, the plates of food barely touched the silence broken by cries and fury. The moment Mariana spat her truth, choosing wealth and passion over the family that had welcomed her. That night had left scars, and no amount of healing could erase them completely. But I also knew it was the night that freed us. My husband Raphael had once told me during his final illness that truth, no matter how painful, would always set us free. At the time, I thought he meant freedom from regrets or misunderstandings. Now I understood more deeply. Truth had shattered us, yes, but it had also stripped away the poison that might have destroyed us quietly from within. As I sat on the porch listening to the soft voices of my family inside, I realized that courage had carried us through. The courage to listen to doubt even when I wanted to ignore it. The courage to follow shadows into alleys even when fear nearly stopped me. The courage to open a door and face a woman with the face of my daughter-in-law, yet not my daughter-in-law at all. Without that courage, I might have lived in silence. I might have let Mariana's lies fester until they consumed us all. And Adrian and Daniel might still be caught in the web of her betrayal, never knowing why love sometimes felt cold. Instead, we faced the storm, and though it tore through us, it left us standing bruised but stronger. Now when I watch Daniel run into Isla's arms laughing as she teaches him how to draw, I feel gratitude wash over me. When I see Adrian look at her with steady affection, I know hope has returned. We lost a daughter-in-law, but we gained someone far more precious. We gained honesty. We gained love. We gained a future untainted by lies. And yet one question lingers in my heart, one I cannot silence. What would you have done if you were me? Would you have stayed quiet to keep the peace, pretending not to see the strange shifts and contradictions, convincing yourself it was only your imagination? Would you have chosen silence even as your grandson cried over a mother who was sometimes sweet and sometimes cruel? Or would you have dared to face it, to pull back the curtain no matter what you found, even if it shattered the very foundation of your family? This is the question that stays with me. It is the question I leave with you. Because every family carries shadows, and sometimes those shadows hide truths that can change everything. So tell me, what would you do? Would you keep the peace, or would you face the storm? I would love to hear your thoughts. Please share your answer in the comments below. And if this story touched you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join our community of listeners who believe in the power of family stories. Do not leave just yet. On your screen, you will find 2 of our most beloved stories waiting for you. I am certain they will surprise you and move you. Click on one and continue this journey with me. Thank you for staying until the very end. May courage guide you, and may truth always light your way.